How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. It's gone.
Back in 2008, a superhero movie hit theaters looking like a normal summer blockbuster, but the truth behind it was crazier and more heartbreaking than almost any film. The Dark Knight tells the story of Batman facing a villain with no goal, no logic, and nothing left to lose, a pure force of chaos unlike anything Gotham City had ever seen. But what most audiences never realized was how complicated and dark everything behind the scenes really was. Director Christopher Nolan had the ambition to turn a comic book movie into a serious crime film. Christian Bale returned in the Batman suit. Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Aaron Eckhart, and Morgan Freeman made up a cast strong enough to anchor any dramatic film. And then there was Heath Ledger, a 28-year-old Australian actor who had openly said he would never do a superhero movie. Locked himself in a hotel room for 6 weeks, wrote in a diary using the character's voice, and created a Joker performance the world had never seen before and likely never will again. From on-set accidents that became iconic cinematic moments, to real explosions in the streets of Chicago with no CGI, to mysteries that have never been fully explained, this film has facts most audiences never knew. Today, we're counting down 15 strange facts about The Dark Knight. And stay until number 1, because it involves an Oscar statue, a rule unlike anything in Academy history, and a 3-year-old girl who had to wait exactly 15 years to receive what belonged to her father. Number 15. The man who once said no to superhero movies. Before The Dark Knight, before Joker, before anything else, there was a meeting between Christopher Nolan and Heath Ledger that ended with a blunt rejection. In 2003, while Nolan was developing Batman Begins, he met Ledger to discuss joining the project. Not as Joker as Batman. Ledger listened and gave a short answer. He had no interest in superhero movies. He didn't see the genre as worth his time or effort. The meeting ended there. Then Batman Begins was released in 2005. Ledger watched it and completely changed his mind. What Nolan had made was not a typical superhero movie. It had psychological depth, real weight, and the ambition of a serious drama. Ledger saw that and reached out to Nolan himself, this time asking about playing Joker in the sequel. Nolan, who had wanted to work with Ledger for a long time, agreed immediately. But when the casting news was announced, the public reaction was anything but enthusiastic. Ledger was known for romantic roles, the charming lead in 10 Things I Hate About You, and the acclaimed performance in Brokeback Mountain. Nobody looked at him and thought of a violent, unpredictable, terrifying villain. Many Batman fans openly protested the casting. Some even started online petitions against it. Nolan never wavered. He knew what he had seen in Ledger's eyes when they talked about the character. The result, the man who said, "I'll never do a superhero movie," won an Oscar for that very superhero role even as the villain. And not one of the people who signed those petitions can look back now without embarrassment. Number 14. The Joker Diary. When Ledger accepted the role, he did not begin by reading the script or studying previous Jokers. He began by disappearing. For about 6 weeks, Ledger locked himself alone in a hotel room, cut off most contact with the outside world, and began building Joker from the inside out. The central tool of that process was a diary he called Joker's Diary. Not a diary of Heath Ledger writing about Joker, but a diary written entirely in Joker's voice and mindset, as if the character himself held the pen. Nolan suggested several inspirations to get him started. A Clockwork Orange and its character Alex, a man who finds pure joy in violence and chaos. Heavy metal music, with its raw, uncontrolled energy, and especially the paintings of Francis Bacon, distorted faces, twisted bodies, the feeling of decay and chaos made visible. Ledger absorbed all of it and poured it into the diary. Pages filled with magazine clippings, photos of Alex from A Clockwork Orange, pictures of Sid Vicious, punk icon of Sex Pistols, handwritten notes rewriting lines from the script the way Joker would say them. Thoughts, emotions, reactions of a man who sees the world as one giant cosmic joke. After Ledger died, his father, Kim Ledger, kept that diary. He shared part of it in the documentary Too Young to Die in 2008, turning pages on camera with slightly trembling hands. What audiences saw was not an actor's preparation notes. It was evidence of a man who truly lived inside another mind, completely, thoroughly, with no distance at all between Heath Ledger and Joker during those 6 weeks. Number 13. Michael Caine forgot every line because he was scared. In the film, there is a scene where Joker and his crew crash Bruce Wayne's fundraiser party walking into a room full of people with knives, makeup, and an energy so unpredictable the whole room freezes. Alfred, Wayne's loyal butler, a man who has seen everything through decades of service, stops cold too. On screen, it looks like a perfect acting moment from Michael Caine. In real life, it was Michael Caine completely forgetting every line he had because he was genuinely frightened. Nolan knew the first reaction to seeing Ledger in full Joker costume would be impossible to recreate once people got used to it. So he chose not to let Caine meet Ledger beforehand. He told Caine Ledger would be in the scene but gave no details. No photos, no meeting in the makeup room. Caine knew Ledger. He knew him as a talented young Australian actor from normal script readings. Then shooting day came. Ledger entered the room in full costume, messy green hair, chalk white face, smeared with red scars, wrinkled purple coat, and the eyes of someone no longer living in the normal world. He looked directly at Caine. And Caine, an actor with over 50 years of experience, who had worked with the biggest names in Hollywood and won 2 Oscars, completely forgot all of his lines, not a few words. Everything. Caine later said, "I'd never experienced before in my career. He gave me a real shock." Nolan kept the moment. It worked perfectly, because Alfred in the script was supposed to be terrified too. The real disruption of a veteran actor became the most honest reaction any director could hope for. Sometimes the best take is the one where nobody is acting. Number 12. Joker's lip-licking was an accident. If you ask anyone about Heath Ledger's Joker, they mention 2 things first: the laugh and the lip-licking. That quick, nervous lick appearing at unpredictable moments feels like a direct window into the unstable mind of the character. Critics wrote about it as a brilliant acting choice, a way for Ledger to show Joker's psychological instability without speaking a word. Analyses of the performance constantly cited it as proof of deep preparation and understanding of the role. The truth is, nobody planned it. The prosthetic makeup, the fake scars at the corners of Ledger's mouth that created Joker's unnaturally wide smile, kept coming loose during filming. It was at risk of falling off at any moment. The only practical solution while cameras were rolling was to lick his lips and hold it in place. So Ledger licked his lips. Not because the character needed to, not because it was a calculated acting choice, because the makeup was trying to fall off onto the floor in the middle of scenes. Jerry Grenell, Ledger's voice coach during production, revealed this in the documentary I Am Heath Ledger nearly a decade after the film's release. It was the first time the truth behind the gesture was publicly explained. And strangely, knowing its practical origin does not lessen its power at all, because Ledger did not simply lick his lips and move on. He turned it into part of the character. The rhythm, timing, and frequency were controlled so instinctively no one realized it began as a makeup fix. A technical accident became a defining character trait. That was not planned acting. That was real-time improvisational genius. Number 11. Ledger directed 2 scenes himself. During production on The Dark Knight, the crew noticed a habit. After finishing his scenes for the day, Ledger did not leave. He stayed on set, sat in corners watching, and studied Nolan's process. How he placed cameras, how he spoke to actors, how he built scenes from ideas on paper into moving images. At first, the crew assumed it was the enthusiasm of an actor wanting to understand filmmaking more deeply. Then Ledger openly told people around him he did not see his future as an actor. He wanted to become a director. The Dark Knight might be one of his final major acting films. After that, he wanted to move behind the camera. Nolan heard this and did something few directors would do. He gave Ledger a real opportunity. In the film, there are 2 homemade Joker hostage videos, amateur recordings sent to Gotham's news stations. Nolan handed both scenes to Ledger to direct himself. The first, Joker filming the murder of Brian Douglas, one of Gotham's civilian Batman copycats. The second, reporter Mike Engel, forced to read Joker's message to camera with a shaking voice and terrified eyes. Ledger chose the camera angles. Ledger directed the other actors. Ledger decided the pacing, lighting, and intentionally crude feeling of the tapes. Nolan did not interfere. He simply let Ledger work and kept the results in the film. They were the only directing scenes of Heath Ledger's career, and also the last ones. Number 10. The 18-wheeler flip was real, not CGI. In the film's most intense chase scene, a massive 18-wheel truck barrels straight toward Batman, then flips completely over, rising vertically before crashing onto the street in downtown Chicago. Audiences assumed it was CGI. It was not. That truck was real, that street was real, and there was a man inside when it flipped. Nolan wanted the stunt done practically from the beginning. No CGI, no miniatures, no digital rescue in post-production. Special effects supervisor Chris Corbold objected immediately. Flipping an 18-wheel truck on a public city street was not listed in any Hollywood safety manual. Corbold suggested using a smaller vehicle like a SWAT van for easier control. Nolan refused. He needed the truck because only something that large would feel right. Corbold finally agreed on one condition, one attempt. If it worked, keep it. If not, CGI. Chicago streets created a specific technical problem. Dense manhole covers meant there were only 60 uninterrupted feet of pavement to place the flipping mechanism. Corbold had to design the entire stunt within that limit, a giant piston hidden inside the trailer, activated remotely. The man in the cab during the flip was stuntman Jim Wilkie, inside a reinforced cabin, wearing fire protection gear and dressed externally in Joker costume because the angle required seeing part of the cab. Corbold, after all the preparation, could not bear to watch. He hid in a nearby alley during the stunt. The truck flipped perfectly on the first try, one take. The entire moment was captured by 6 IMAX cameras placed at different angles. Corbold came out of the alley, saw the footage, and could barely believe it. Nolan never needed CGI. Number 9. The exploding hospital was an abandoned candy factory. The shot of Joker, dressed as a nurse walking away from Gotham General Hospital, while it explodes behind him. Floors collapsing step by step, smoke and fire rising as he casually strolls forward, is one of the most iconic moments not only of The Dark Knight, but of the entire 2000s. And it was not in the original script. Chris Corbold, the same practical effects chief who reluctantly agreed to flip the truck, was the one who suggested it. He told Nolan that if they found the right location, they could destroy a real building completely. Nolan loved the idea immediately and wrote the scene into the script. The problem was finding the building. The production needed something large enough to look like a hospital, already scheduled for demolition, and available to be blown up in a way that looked like chaotic destruction rather than controlled demolition. The search took months. Finally, they found it, the old Brax Candy Factory outside Chicago. A 4-story building closed and waiting to be torn down. No one expected a building once used to make candy to become the most terrifying hospital explosion in film history. The effects team rigged explosives in reverse of normal demolition procedure. Instead of collapsing inward neatly, the building had to burst outward and fall apart in sections, as if being destroyed from the inside by a madman. Then came the most famous moment. One detonator appears to fail. Ledger pauses, looks back in confusion, then boom. The world's assumed it was brilliant improvisation, Ledger naturally reacting to a real malfunction. Corbold later confirmed the truth. That beat was completely scripted, timed precisely so. Joker would appear to control chaos even when everything seemed to go wrong. Chicago's Sweet at Can't Victory became 2008's most frightening explosion, and almost nobody knew it. Number 8. The first superhero movie to pass $1 billion. Before The Dark Knight was released, Warner Brothers was facing a marketing problem with no clear answer. The movie they had in their hands was darker than any superhero film ever made. No bright colors. No light-hearted humor. No completely happy ending. Batman wins but has to run, Harvey Dent dies in disgrace, and Gotham is saved by a lie. That was not the formula for a normal summer blockbuster. Then in January 2008, 6 months before release, Heath Ledger died. Warner Brothers suddenly had to face a question with no precedent in Hollywood history. How do you market a movie when the actor playing the main villain has just passed away, without being seen as exploiting tragedy, but also without pretending nothing happened? The studio decided to let the movie speak for itself. They did not change the posters. They did not cut any of Ledger's scenes. They did nothing to reduce Joker's presence in the marketing. In fact, they couldn't, because Joker was the center of the entire film. On July 18, 2008, The Dark Knight opened with $158.4 million in its first weekend, breaking the U.S. opening weekend record at the time. The film held the #1 box office spot for 4 straight weeks. By the end of its run, The Dark Knight earned over $1 billion worldwide, becoming the first superhero movie in cinema history to cross that mark. Warner Brothers had worried the film's darkness would push mainstream audiences away. They worried Ledger's death would create a wave of complicated emotions that would be impossible to manage. Both fears were wrong. Audiences did not go because they were curious about a dead actor. They went because the movie was truly great. Number 7. Jack Nicholson was angry he was never asked. In 1989, Jack Nicholson played Joker in Batman and created one of the most iconic villain performances of that decade. The wide grin, the purple suit, the endlessly quoted lines. Nicholson's 1989 version was Joker in the minds of an entire generation. Nearly 20 years later, when The Dark Knight was announced with Heath Ledger as Joker, Nicholson did not receive a single phone call. No polite email. No coffee meeting to inform him. Nothing. Warner Bros. And Christopher Nolan did not ask for his opinion, did not notify him in advance, and did not invite him in any form. Nicholson learned the news through the press like any ordinary viewer. His reaction was not private. In an interview, he said bluntly, "I'm furious. They never asked me about the sequel with Joker. I know how to do that." The quote was widely reported and became one of the most discussed behind-the-scenes dramas before release. But put that statement in realistic context. In 2007, when production began, Nicholson was 70 years old. The Joker in this film needed to run, climb, perform complex action scenes, and sustain manic energy for over 2 hours. The real question was not why they didn't ask Nicholson. It was if they had asked, would he have accepted? And could he have done it? The answer to both was no. The funniest twist. Nicholson was angry about not being asked to play a role he likely could not have done. And Ledger, the replacement, created a Joker the world later recognized as superior to every version before it. Sometimes not being asked is the best thing that can happen to your legacy. Number 6. Ledger only saw 6 minutes of the film before he died. Heath Ledger completed all of his scenes in The Dark Knight in late 2007. The movie was scheduled for release in July 2008. He died on January 22, 2008, exactly between those two dates, 6 months before release. Before his death, an advance screening was held. Not the full movie, only the opening scene. The bank robbery, Joker's first introduction, running about 6 minutes. Ledger watched it. He saw himself on screen for the first time as Joker. The strange walk, the head movements, the voice built from 6 weeks in a hotel room, the white makeup with smeared red scars. 6 minutes. Then it ended. That was all of the completed movie Ledger ever saw. He never watched the rest. Never saw the interrogation room scene. Never saw the hospital explosion. Never saw the ending of the story he had poured months of preparation and filming into. He never knew the audience reaction when the movie came out. The applause, the breathless silence when Joker appeared. The reviews calling his performance one of the greatest ever put on screen. He never knew about the Oscar. Never knew about the $1 billion. Never knew that the 6 weeks he locked himself in a hotel room with the Joker diary would become one of the legendary stories in film history. In those 6 minutes, Joker robs a bank, kills each of his partners one by one, then steps on a bus and disappears into the crowd. That was the first and last time Heath Ledger ever saw his Joker on screen, walking away and disappearing, as if the character already knew what was coming. Number 5. Katie Holmes was replaced and the mystery behind it. In Batman Begins, Katie Holmes played Rachel Dawes, the only woman Bruce Wayne truly loved, the person who anchored his humanity amid all the darkness and violence. It was an important role, and Holmes played it well enough for audiences to accept her. Then The Dark Knight arrived, and Rachel Dawes was no longer Katie Holmes. No official announcement, no press conference explanation, no public statement from the studio explaining why Batman's central love interest had suddenly been recast, this time with Maggie Gyllenhaal. The press immediately speculated. The most widespread version. Nolan personally did not want Holmes back and sought a replacement. Nolan flatly denied it, telling reporters he was disappointed. Holmes could not return, and the replacement was something he had no choice about. That answer opened more questions than it closed. Unable to return for what reason? Scheduling conflict? Contract issue? Something else? In 2008, Holmes was in one of the most scrutinized periods of her personal life. Her marriage to Tom Cruise, a shift in her public image, and a level of media attention few actors ever face. Whether those factors influenced her decision not to return to The Dark Knight was never confirmed and never denied. Holmes said briefly when asked, "It was the right decision for me at that time. I have no regrets." A perfect answer for someone who wants to say nothing while still saying something. Gyllenhaal took the role, performed well, and Rachel Dawes dies at the end of the film, closing the character's story without needing further resolution. The real reason Holmes did not return was never officially confirmed, and it remains one of the few mysteries The Dark Knight still keeps to this day. Number 4. Joker's clapping scene was not in the script. There is a moment in The Dark Knight that sends a chill down your spine every time you rewatch it. Gordon has just been promoted to commissioner, the whole room applauds, shakes hands, the satisfied formal faces of Gotham officials everywhere. Then the camera cuts to Joker, handcuffed, a prisoner, in a situation where by all normal logic he should stay silent and wait. And Joker starts clapping, slowly, alone, with the look of a man watching a comedy only he understands. It is one of the most haunting moments in the film, and it was completely absent from the script. Not one word. Ledger sat there during the scene, watched the promotion unfold, and invented the gesture while filming. He did not ask Nolan. He did not warn anyone. He simply did it, and Nolan saw it on the monitor, understood immediately, and kept it. But this needs to be clarified because too many myths exist about Ledger improvising in this film. The hospital explosion moment where Ledger pauses when the detonator seems delayed and looks confused, that was not improvisation. Chris Corbould confirmed clearly. That moment was fully scripted and precisely designed to make Joker seem in control even when chaos appears to go wrong. Many things that look improvised in The Dark Knight were actually carefully written and executed. Nolan is a highly controlled filmmaker, not the kind who lets everything happen freely. That is why Joker's clapping scene is even more special. In a movie where nearly everything was calculated in advance, the one true improvised moment left in the film became one of the moments audiences remember most. Ledger did not need a script to create that. He only needed to understand his character more deeply than anyone else in the room. Number 3, the film was delivered to theaters under a fake title. This is something few people outside the industry talk about, but anyone who works in theaters knows. The biggest movies, the most anticipated movies, and the ones at highest risk of leaks are almost never shipped under their real titles. From production until the reels reach projectionists, or in the digital era, from encrypted files until decryption at theaters, everything happens under a completely different name. The Dark Knight, the most anticipated movie of 2008, the movie everyone in the business was discussing, the movie featuring the performance of an actor who had just died and which the whole world wanted to see, was delivered to theaters worldwide under the name Oliver's Army, not The Dark Knight. Not Batman, not anything suggesting Gotham black capes or a white-faced laughing madman. Oliver's Army, the title of a 1979 song by Elvis Costello, with no connection whatsoever to Batman, Joker, or anything in Christopher Nolan's universe. Theater employees receiving those reels or encrypted files had no idea what they were holding. They handled Oliver's Army like any other movie, until the seal was broken and the real title appeared. The practical reason was obvious. Prevent camcorder piracy, protect the content until official release day, and reduce the risk of any plot details leaking before launch. But there is a coincidence that is hard to ignore. A movie about a villain with no true name, no background, no clear identity, a character the film never explains or locates, was shipped anonymously under an unrelated name. Joker would have loved that. He always loved chaos hiding behind an ordinary surface. Number 2. Ledger saw his future as a director. There was a habit the crew of The Dark Knight remembered clearly about Heath Ledger. He never left set immediately after finishing his scenes. While most actors completed the day's work and returned to their hotel, Ledger stayed. He found a quiet seat, watched Nolan work on scenes that did not involve him, and followed every decision. Where the camera was placed and why, how lighting was built to create a certain feeling, how Nolan guided actors exactly where he wanted them without blunt instruction. Then he began asking questions. Not the questions of an actor wanting context for his role. The questions of someone learning to direct. Why choose this angle instead of that one? Why use natural light here and artificial light there? Why cut here instead of somewhere else? Nolan recognized it and answered seriously. Not as if explaining to a curious actor, but as if speaking with a colleague forming his own creative mind. Ledger did not keep this private. He openly told people on set, cast members, crew, people he had worked beside for months. He did not see himself as an actor long-term. The Dark Knight might be one of his final acting films. He wanted to direct. He wanted to stand behind the camera and build stories instead of stepping inside them. Nolan later confirmed this in multiple interviews, that Ledger truly was preparing for a career shift, and the questions he asked were not those of an actor, but of a director in training. Ledger was right about one thing. The Dark Knight was the last acting film he completed. He was right in a way he never intended. Number 1. Ledger's Oscar would belong to his daughter. At the 2009 Academy Awards, when Heath Ledger's name was announced for Best Supporting Actor, no one walked out smiling like a winner. His father, mother, and 2 sisters stepped onto the stage, 4 people in dark clothing, carrying something no Hollywood spotlight could hide. It was one of the quietest and heaviest moments in the 96-year history of the Oscars. Ledger was the first posthumous acting winner since Peter Finch for Network, more than 3 decades without precedent. And here is what most viewers did not know. The Oscar statue in his family's hands that night was not permanently Heath Ledger's Oscar. Right before the ceremony, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences made an unprecedented decision. Under a special rule created for this case, the Oscar would not immediately be permanently awarded to the family. Instead, it would be held and given to Heath Ledger's daughter, Matilda Rose Ledger, on her 18th birthday. Matilda was born October 28, 2005. When her father died in January 2008, she was only 2 years old, too young to have real memories of him, too young to understand what was happening when the world spoke about her father, too young to know that the film he had just finished would become one of the greatest movies in cinema history. Under that rule, the Oscar had to wait until October 28, 2023, 15 years after it was awarded. A little girl grew up with images of her father through films, through newspapers, through stories told by others, through a Joker diary her grandfather preserved. Then on her 18th birthday, she received the heaviest physical proof of that legacy. Not a toy, not a memory. A gold statue recognized by the whole world as deserved. That is our number one fact. Not because it is the strangest or most surprising, but because it captures everything about the Dark Knight and Heath Ledger in one image. A man who gave himself completely to a role he never knew would become his legacy, and the final person to hold proof of it was someone too young to understand its meaning when it was created. Matilda Ledger turned 18 on October 28, 2023. Her father's Oscar had waited exactly 15 years. And those are 15 strange facts about The Dark Knight. From the man who once said no to superhero movies and then created the greatest Joker performance in film history, to the diary written entirely in the character's voice, to the lip-licking born from loose makeup, to the Oscar statue that had to wait 15 years for a little girl. The Dark Knight is not just a superhero movie. It is proof that when a person decides to burn completely for a role, holding nothing back, calculating nothing, believing in no limits, the result can surpass anything any script could ever write. Heath Ledger did not know he was creating a legacy. He was simply doing his job as well as he possibly could until the final moment. And that was all it took. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe so you do not miss the next discoveries about the movies that shaped our generation.